This is Battleground PA, a PennLive podcast discussing the issues that matter to Pennsylvanians and documenting the events in the Keystone State and beyond that could shape how you vote in the 2024 elections.
Well, hello, everyone. Good to be with you this day after, or time after, because you may be listening to it even later, after the election 2024 that many are calling a historic election. This is Joyce Davis, and this is Battleground PA post-election. And we have with us today, of course, our trustee Jeffrey Lord, who's our Republican analyst, but we also have called in John Cole, with the Pennsylvania Capital Star, who has been covering these elections all of these many months. And so we're going to pull in his expertise for our conversation today. I was just tipping my hat and congratulating Jeffrey Lord on the success of his. He's a very strong Trump supporter. So Jeffrey, I'm going to give you the first opportunity to talk about what went so right with your candidate.
Well, Joyce, I think the thing that appeals to people about him is distinctly that he was not a politician. And the very things that some people can't abide with him, that he's very blunt spoken and says what he means and all of that kind of thing, I think in this day and age is appealing to a lot of Americans. So I think he appeals stylistically, but then again, I think he appeals substantively. And I think that he is, whether it's the economy or in getting involved in foreign wars or on and on and on goes the list. When you've got Americans living their everyday life and they've got to deal with inflation or they got to deal with a high price of gas, or they're looking at all these horrific pictures of war in Ukraine and war in Israel and Hamas and all this kind of thing. I think that they really do look at somebody and say, who can get us out of this? And I think that in that sense, it comes down, as it always does, as a choice between two candidates. And, in this, I always find this interesting. American presidential campaigns, and I've read my history. I mean, you think of, for example, the campaigns between Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams in 1828, I guess it was, or 1824, and then 1828. Well, I mean, Andrew Jackson was quite the rough-hewn guy, a general and all of this kind of stuff, and plain spoken. And John Quincy Adams, son of a president, a former president of Harvard, or went to Harvard, or whatever. And people made their choice. What they didn't have in those days was social media. They didn't have Zoom. They didn't have Facebook or X or television and all that. And I really do think that that has made a huge difference just in our politics and how we conduct them. And I think it did in this case.
But I will tell you, they didn't have women running for office then either. And hopefully we've at least now broached that. But clearly, Donald Trump spoke to a lot of people who are now bringing him back into the White House. But I will say I just finished listening to Kamala Harris's concession speech.
Yeah.
And I think it was quite dignified, quite the right spirit of congratulating the winner, letting them know that she's still on him, though. She's still going to be in the fight. And but also, again, the peaceful transfer of power. I don't think we're going to have another January 6th being instigated or even encouraged by this vice president, which is a good thing. But let me bring John in here. John, we're talking the national scene, and again, congratulations to my friend Jeffrey for supporting his candidate. But right now we're looking at some other races, and not all of them are very clear at this point. So bring us up to speed. What's going on in Pennsylvania?
Sure. So once again, of course, thanks for having me on, Joyce, and Jeffrey, good to see you as well. So again, for the presidential race, I think I would like to talk about it for just a moment, just to let the audience know, if they're wondering, that in 2020, Trump didn't win the state, but he won this time. So you kind of wonder, where did he make up the ground? So we're still getting some of that data is still coming in, but we can kind of point to a few counties that he has already flipped or seemingly close to flipping. And I think those are some areas we should talk about briefly. One of them being Northampton County. That is a county in the Lehigh Valley. It's often viewed as a bellwether where, in 2016, Trump won the county, but in 2020, Joe Biden won the county. This time it went back to Trump. He, as of the latest data on Wednesday afternoon, over 95% of the votes tabulated there. Trump had, I believe, a 3-point lead in that county. Again, it's usually a good indicator of how a statewide race is going. A second.
Why would he have won that? I mean, what changed? Because people talked to me. I said, I don't see that the former president is more popular now. In fact, I think he must be less popular. But Joyce was wrong. So what was the difference?
I have not talked to anyone in Northampton County yet, so I don't want to speak on their behalf as someone who lives in Philadelphia. But I guess if we're just looking at exit polling data, I suppose one could say that with the economy being the biggest issue, perhaps there were enough voters in that particular county that thought his former President Trump's message on the economy was stronger or resonated with them more than Vice President Harris. But again, I don't want to speculate there. But one thing we can say is that, again, it's a county that in 2012, Obama won it. In 2016, Trump did. 2020, Biden did. So it's an area that you have these swing voters that truly aren't partisan, that, when the election comes, they decide who they're supporting. And it's an area that usually gives you a good idea which party is going to do well. So Northampton County is one of them. Another is Erie County, which is in the northwest region of the state. That's always been a pretty good indicator as well. It's an area where Obama won in 2012, Trump won in 2016, Biden won it back in 2020 and 2024. Here we are again, where it went back to the Republicans, Trump, and he ultimately won the state. So again, we'll have to see the exact reason coming out of that county, but another area that flipped in Trump's favor. And there's two other counties we're keeping an eye on that appears to have flipped, but again, we're waiting for that data to kind of, it's closer, is Monroe County, which I think is really fascinating. That's in the Poconos, so like the northeast region of the state. It borders New Jersey. The last time they voted for a Republican candidate for president was 2004. So that's one of the counties that you would think that's actually a more significant development.
And Jeffrey, did the former president spend a lot of time in these areas that he's talking about? Did that help things? Because I don't remember him going to Munger a lot, or maybe he did. I don't know.
Well, I think, he went to places close enough. He in terms of Northampton County, he went to Lehigh County, he went to Allentown.
Yeah.
I myself went to one of these events that he had. It was in Wilkes-Barre. And so, I was, as somebody who's been through the Pennsylvania political system multiples of times, I was just impressed with the way they ran the campaign. They sent him to all the places that they needed to send him, and that he should have gone, and repeatedly in a lot of cases. I would joke with people when I was doing interviews outside of our area that sometimes I thought Donald Trump and Kamala Harris were living in Pennsylvania.
They were here quite a bit, and it paid off for him. But John, you said there was one other area that you thought we should pay attention to.
Yes, just one more. And just one other note about Monroe County. Even though, to my knowledge, Trump did not step foot to campaign in Monroe County, that's in the Scranton, Wilkes-Barre TV media market.
Exactly.
So to Jeffrey's point, when former President Trump visited Wilkes-Barre or in that area, if you lived in Monroe County, you were able to see that on your local news. So just wanted to kind of make note of that. And then the final county, again, this is the most narrow one. So by the time we're recording this, there's a chance it may flip back, but is Bucks County. It's a suburb just north of Philadelphia. The last time that county went for a Republican was 1988. So it's been a long time. However, we've seen it's in the Philadelphia area. It's a densely populated suburb, Bucks County. It's usually pretty close where, for example, Biden won it by, I think, 3 or 4 points last time. So it's never particularly in one party's camp or the other by a significant margin. It's usually close. But Republicans earlier this year regained a voter registration advantage in Bucks County for the first time since 2007. They were starting to make some inroads on the ground. And as we're talking on Wednesday afternoon, or early evening, we should say, Trump is leading there by, I think, just a few hundred votes. So again, we have over 95% reporting. I suppose there's still a chance it flips. But either way, even if Harris wins it by a few hundred votes or so, it's still an improvement from the previous election when Joe Biden won it by 4%, which is a couple thousand votes. So there are 4 counties.
And Jeffrey, we would have thought that the area around Scranton would have been Biden territory, right? I mean, that's supposed to be right. That's
Well,
where
Biden for sure, but not Harris. I mean, she wasn't from Scranton, and
except the whole campaign on the other side was trying to say she is Biden. So
yeah. Well, they didn't buy it.
it's not positive.
Joyce, I assume you've been up there at some point. When you drive around, it is amusing to me. You get off, I don't know, 81 or 8, whatever it is, and there's a huge highway sign, the President Joe Biden Expressway.
Right.
You can't miss this, and that was home base for him.
That's why it's just so baffling. I mean, this was truly a surprise election, I think, in many ways. But John, go ahead. We're just conversing it up here. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I just wanted to add on Scranton because I can actually add this personal anecdote. I've covered many events in Scranton over the years. I was there the Saturday before the election. And why was I there? President Joe Biden was there to deliver an address at a union hall in Scranton on behalf of Harris. And to Jeffrey's point, they know him well up there, where Lackawanna County, which is the county in which Scranton's in Lackawanna County. It's an area that Democrats have had, been popular there for a long time. However, as the years have gone by, Republicans have been making gains in that area. And the fascinating thing is this: in 2016, when Trump won the state, Hillary only won that county by, I believe, 3 points. When Biden was there, Scranton's own, even if I know Republicans like to say he only lived there for 10 years, but still, he was from there and lived there.
Yes.
He grew up there. Biden ended up winning that county by 7 or 8 points. So it was a several point difference, and it means something.
I wonder if he would have won it this time, Jeffrey. I would. If we
well, I think that's possible because, one of the things I've noticed in politics over the years, there is what I'll call, for lack of a better phrase, tribal unity.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any difference if you're talking anything, if you're talking religion, Catholics, Jews, Protestants, etc., or if you're talking men or women, gender, if you're talking race, black, white, Latino, etc., people tend to gravitate to, as it were, their own in these kind of situations. So that it doesn't surprise me.
You're giving him a definite advantage that poor Kamala did not have, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Not to mention that we live in the eastern United States, and you say the word California, and people silently are rolling their eyes because they think, "Oh God, all those nutcakes from out in California," And she fit the bill, I think, to some of these people.
Well, I would not call her a nutcake, Jeffrey.
No, I don't mean to do that, but I just mean that she brings the whole California baggage with her.
Well, okay. So, John, go ahead. You wanted to add something about this, and then let's move on to our folks. Yeah.
Yes, and just very quickly, just to say, Harris did win Lackawanna County, where Scranton is, but it kind of returned back to those 2016 Hillary Clinton levels of like 3 points. So it goes to show you that Biden's roots in that area, at least when he was at the top of the ticket, it did seemingly benefit Democrats. That's all. I just wanted to add that last note that Harris still won the county, but the margin was more narrow. And I think it's a game of inches, as they say. And I think, those margins add up.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Joyce, one last thing. Yeah. I think, and we probably touched on this before, but I really do think that we're watching sort of a switch of Republicans and Democrats in terms of the party, and that the Democrats, who used to be the party, what Franklin Roosevelt called the forgotten man, blue collar workers, that sort of thing, and Republicans were the country club party, the elites and all that kind of thing. I think those roles have, in their own fashion, switched.
People have said that a lot. Yeah, although I will tell you this, I would love to get back to the day of the dignity of the Republican Party. I loved that. I loved the family values.
Joyce, you're a country club Republican at heart.
I'm not saying I'm an elitist, but I like a certain degree of decorum in society. Go ahead. John, so what about the other elections, our local? What are we watching still?
Sure. So again, in Pennsylvania, I know we had a lot of attention on the presidential race, and understandably so. The 19 electoral votes were important. And I think Joyce and Jeffrey, you both mentioned that it seemed as though Harris and Trump were living in the state. On the final day of the campaign, they both were crisscrossing the state. So I get it. But important statewide row offices, as well as the U.S. Senate race. I'll start with U.S. Senate because as we're recording right now, we don't have a final result. So just to be clear, but as of now, as we're recording on Wednesday afternoon, Republican Dave McCormick, who is challenging U.S. Senator Bob Casey, has a lead over Casey right now.
Which is a surprise. I think it is a surprise. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I think, again, Casey is a well-known name in Pennsylvania politics to those who are certainly older than I when his dad was governor many, many moons ago. People knew his father, and Senator Casey, for beyond his dad being who he was, Senator Casey served in multiple row offices, and he's in his third term in the U.S. Senate. He was elected in 2006. He's the longest serving Democratic U.S. Senator in Pennsylvania history. So Casey, beyond his father's name, and I know people like to often bring up his father, he himself has been in office for a while. And throughout the race, it was, Casey, most polling showed he had a lead. But as we got closer to election day, again, the polls showed it was getting tighter. Going into election day, I think a lot of the national ratings outlets, like Larry Sabado's Crystal Ball and Inside Elections, had it like lean or tilt Democrat. However, the Cook Political Report, which is another widely respected national ratings outlet, called it a toss-up. So there was indication the race was getting closer. But the fact that as we're speaking now, McCormick has a lead, a narrow one. Neither, and to be clear, no one has conceded and or declared victory. But as we're talking right now, there's only tens of thousands of votes still to be tabulated. McCormick right now having the advantage there. We shall see what happens there, but that would be a significant development.
That seems to work against our argument because really Casey is of our tribe. I mean, it's McCormick who seems to be the outsider coming in.
Joyce, one thing I would add, and maybe I've said this before, but I'll say it again. In 1980, the various state Republican parties around the country were having great trouble getting their, as it were, A-list candidates to run for the United States Senate because they thought, well, I'm not going to win and I don't want to damage my career in the future, et cetera. So they didn't do it. So these parties were stuck with the, as it were, the B and C list candidates. What none of them anticipated was the Reagan landslide. And the day after that election, all these B and C types were United States senators elect. I mean, it really took people in the day quite by surprise. So I think that, I mean, my point is that you get this tremendous pull from a presidential candidate. You can. And I think that was at work here with Donald Trump, and I think that has helped Dave McCormick.
Interesting. Yeah. So this time the president had some, because we have talked many times here to say how many of his candidates haven't actually won and how the Republicans weren't winning here. And suddenly this whole thing shifts. John, you're shaking your head. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to Jeffrey's point, I think we hear the term coattails, if a candidate at the top of the ticket often has a big enough of a margin of victory, there are other candidates on the same party that will benefit. And Dave McCormick, now certainly that's not to take anything away from Dave. I think it's, to be clear, Dave was running against Senator Casey. But to Jeffrey's point, I know what he means, that essentially, often the whole party benefits, because right as we're looking at it right now, Trump's leading in Pennsylvania by, I think, 3-ish points right now. And that would be a bigger margin than Biden's victory in 2020 and Trump's victory in 2016. So this would be a more substantial victory for Trump. So right now, again, McCormick leading there. And it's interesting to kind of keep an eye on some of the other states because Republicans are now going to have a majority in the U.S. Senate. They flipped multiple seats that have already been confirmed and called. We're talking about West Virginia, which was expected. Montana, another conservative state where Democrat John Tester lost. And we're looking at Ohio, where Senator Sherrod Brown lost, and that state's gone more red. And we're looking at a few others. We're waiting for results. But point being, we've seen some of those other states where those Republicans have been lifted up and won. Pennsylvania could be one, but we don't know yet. And to be clear, so we don't want to make that determination. But
which does, as he said, give him a very powerful mandate. It really does. I mean, he will really basically have unchecked authority to do what he needs to do, right? So, yeah.
I mean, again, that's something Jeffrey will talk about, I guess, how Republicans are going to govern. I can't speak for them there. But beyond that race, that's the only I would say the only statewide race that we don't know in Pennsylvania is the Casey McCormick Senate race. However, there are other important offices in Pennsylvania. There are what we refer to as row offices. There are three.
The Attorney General's office was also, I think, probably an upset. I think the name recognition that DePasquale had, almost we thought he was a shoo-in, but obviously not.
And it's interesting. So there's 3 row offices in Pennsylvania: Attorney General, Auditor General, and Treasurer. Republicans won all 3 of those. Just to let people know again how happy Republicans are. It's because they not only are they winning at the top of the ticket, because we know Pennsylvania genuinely does have a rich history of ticket splitting. If I may go back just a moment to 2020, when Biden won the state, then Attorney General Josh Shapiro, a Democrat, won. But guess what? Republicans Stacey Garrity and Tim DeFore won. So Pennsylvania has a history of people saying, I like a Democrat in this race, but a Republican in that. Right now, we're looking at Republicans doing very well in these statewide races where first we could talk about Attorney General, Joyce, that you mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, again, why do you think, as you look at, I mean, what would be the reason that they would go against, the Democrat who's very well known?
So again, Jeff. Well, I'll say one thing, and I'm curious for Jeffrey's response. Again, there's usually not a lot of polling going into Attorney General races. It's not like a presidential race when you see a poll dropped every day, but polling showed the whole time that D. Pasquale, who again is the former 2-term state auditor general, against Republican Dave Sunday, who was the declared victor. He's the York County district attorney. Polling showed it was quite close. Anecdotally, something I do wonder was about, I guess, campaign fundraising, advertising, things of that nature. I live in Philadelphia. The Philadelphia media market is the biggest media market in the state. To my knowledge, I don't know if D. Pasquale was on television in this market.
Oh, really?
Again, I don't know definitively, but I don't know if he was. And if he was not at a large scale, I can tell you definitively that either Sunday or super PACs that were supporting Sunday's candidacy were on television in the Philadelphia media market. So it's something I kind of do wonder where
television matters in these things. Yeah.
And I think I'm curious of Jeffrey, is it a combination of, campaign ad spending where they're able to be on markets that one candidate's not, or is it another example of coattails from the top of the ticket? I don't know, but I'm curious what you would think.
I think it's coattails. And one thing that I will say, when I literally went in to vote here the other day, and you've got somebody to explain the ballot to you and all this kind of thing, I realized we don't do straight party, ballots anymore. It used to be you went in there and it was ka-ching and you voted Republican or Democrat and you were out. Right. And now, if you're going to vote the straight ticket, you got to go individually through each position. And that says to me in turn that people were really revved up by Donald Trump and national issues, et cetera, because it does take a little effort to go, ka-ching, 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 as opposed to just doing zinc. And
absolutely,
all the candidates all at once get your vote.
But one thing that's worth noting, this is not the first presidential election since that's the case, Jeffrey, with the straight party.
Right. Exactly.
That was in 2019 due to Act 77 when the compromise bill was mail-in voting. So again, Democrats wanted mail-in voting. They got that. Democrats did not want to give up the straight party ticket because if I were to, I can't speak on behalf of Democrats, but from what I understand is that Democrats traditionally have had a large voter registration advantage in Pennsylvania. They still have an advantage to this day, especially where I'm at in Philly and the other areas. It would be a lot easier for those who are registered Democrat to go in, press that button and walk out. And it would benefit a lot of the Democrats down ballot. So that's worth noting here too.
And Joyce, there's one other thing that I think we should mention that is unique to Pennsylvania, and that is the Amish vote. And I think that I've seen various articles about how strong it was, and and very conservative. And I can tell you one story that always to this day amuses me. In 1970, when I was a student at Franklin Marshall and I was the head of the F&M College Republicans, President Richard Nixon came to Lancaster to campaign for Senator Hugh Scott, the Republican senator from Pennsylvania, a long time, who was also, like Mitch McConnell, the Republican Senate leader. So Hugh Scott was in this very difficult campaign. So Nixon comes to campaign for him. And the way this was done was the rally, as it were, was at the Lancaster airport. And President Nixon swoops in on Marine One. They land the helicopter, total 20th century thing. You look over in the crowd, and there were hundreds of Amish people
Wow.
literally with the horse and buggies and all of this kind of thing. And it was just the juxtaposition of the helicopter and the horses and buggies, And
So
I think that has grown larger for this particular election for all kinds of reasons, but that it really did play a role.
Well, one of the things is very clear that people got out to vote this time. I mean, they
Yes.
were out in record numbers. Am I right, John? Is this one of the biggest turnouts in a long time from what you're seeing?
We're still waiting against some of the results to be finalized, but this is a high voter turnout election, to be very clear. But I don't know if it's going to surpass 2020 because we saw that was astronomical there. But it seems to be, again, this is not a low voter turnout election, to be very clear. And I think the interesting thing is, as we kind of continue to delve into the data, is to see where these areas that Republicans are making gains. And is it just because Trump's at the ticket, or we won't know this answer yet, or is it longer term trends that Republicans will continue to win these voters over? That is a story that I'm sure I will and other reporters will continue to report on as time goes on. But it's really fascinating to see the results of this election. Republicans having a very good night again, winning Attorney General, Auditor General, Treasurer. It's worth noting.
It was a sweep. And I remember having conversations here when we had the Rogette here, basically her saying, but you guys aren't winning. You guys aren't winning. Well, now it looks like the Republicans indeed are winning. And I think that's the next thing we need to delve into for our battleground, at just what happened to the Democratic Party and what are they going to do about it in Pennsylvania? There's got to be some soul searching, right? I mean, I'm sure there was soul searching amongst Republicans 4 years ago, right?
Yeah. Oh, sure. I just think that one of the things that always plays a role in an election are the facts on the ground.
Yeah.
And whatever the state of the economy is, when we were young, Joyce, and it was the Vietnam War, there was LBJ who'd gotten elected in a landslide in 1964. And by 1968, the only place they could take him in the country to be in public were military bases. He was so unpopular. So it really does, outside factors like that make a big difference.
And there will be elections, the midterms coming up, when the voters will have another chance to kind of say whether things are better or not. Remember, and there's been a lot of promises made about the economy.
Well, and Joyce, I mean, you're 100% right. And going back to my Reagan days, he gets elected in 1980 in a 44-state landslide over Jimmy Carter. And when all the media said things are close and it's going to be very close, et cetera. 2 years later, in 1982, his economic program had been passed, but it hadn't kicked in. So the economy was still in what he called the Carter recession and all this kind of thing. Republicans got clobbered, absolutely clobbered in those elections. But shortly thereafter, after the election in early 1983, the economic program did kick in. So by 1984, wow, things were roaring along, et cetera, and 49 state landslides. So it is very much a result of what's going on.
I do think voters are going to be expecting a lot.
I think
a lot
that's right.
Promise, and that they're going to be expecting lower prices. They're going to. I worry about what they're really expecting can happen at the border and how quickly he can solve all of these. They're going to be. And as I say, promises were made, and they're going to have to at some point be kept, or somebody's going to have to pay for it. John, is there any final thing you want to say about the Pennsylvania aspect of this, or?
Sure. And again, as we're waiting for results to come in, we know the presidential race, we know the 3 row offices waiting for Senate, congressional. I just want to touch quickly on Congress and this Pennsylvania General Assembly. Again, a good night for Republicans in Pennsylvania for Congress because they flipped 2 seats in Pennsylvania. Congressman Matt Cartwright, a Democrat in Joe Biden's original hometown, again, the Scranton area. He lost to Republican challenger Rob Bresnahan. He already conceded the race. We know that. And then in the Lehigh Valley, Democratic Congresswoman Susan Wild also conceded her race to Republican challenger Ryan McKenzie, a state representative up in that area. So it goes to show you that Republicans have not only won those races, they flipped 2 seats in Congress, which may help them maintain that majority in the chamber. I know we don't have final numbers there, but they may do that.
It won't hurt. Let's put it that way.
And then, one of the other, go ahead.
You go first, Jeffrey, then I'll end with
Well, all I was going to say was Scott Perry had a real race here. Janelle Stelson,
We did, yes.
as you know, as we talked with her. I mean, I have long since become convinced, having worked for the movie star president, that anybody that is well known because there are movies or their television, whatever they're doing on television, gives them a significant advantage. And I think Janelle had some real assets going into this, and yet she wasn't able to overcome. It was close, but no sales. So I just think that's interesting.
So what's so baffling about this is someone who has not been responsive to so many of his constituents. I've gotten loads of letters and op-eds and all of that lambasting Perry for not being responsive and being absent and being extremist, and yet he's ushered back into office, or it looks like it. It's not all done yet, but it looks like it. John, what else do you want to add to this before we have to close out?
Absolutely. And just one thing on Perry, I don't know if that race has been formally called by the Associated Press. I know he's leading. And again, the Jeffries, I know he's leading, but I don't know if the AP formally made that call, but I know he's in a good position, to be clear. And then the final thing is the General Assembly, because we don't. So right now, as we know, and I'm sure to those who follow politics, Governor Josh Shapiro loves talking about him being the only governor in the nation with a divided state legislature. He mentions it quite often on the stump and in other areas. We don't know if that's going to be the case or not yet still, because we're still waiting for results to come in. We can confirm that the state Senate, which is a Republican majority, will be a Republican majority. Still, Democrats have flipped one seat to confirm the flip one seat. That was in Harrisburg. State Representative Patty Kim won her race for the state Senate. It was an open seat where it was State Senator John DeSanto, a Republican, announced he was not running. That area is quite favorable to Democrats now after redistricting. And Representative Patty Kim, and by the way, to Jeffrey's point, I think Representative Kim, before she was a state rep, she was in council. I think she was on TV years ago as well. So
absolutely. That's right. Journalist, TV journalist. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Exactly, to that point.
And your point well made, Jeffrey. Once again, Jeffrey, you're right. You're just right. I can't get over it, But anyway, go ahead, John.
Just Joyce, one other closing comment in terms of looking to the future. And I'll start with a little history. In 1952, General Dwight Eisenhower, very famous and well-known and liked in the day, picked as his running mate 39-year-old California Senator Richard Nixon. And who's that? And what no one could possibly know is that from that moment on, Richard Nixon was going to play a huge event in American politics and eventually become president and all of this kind of thing. I say this because the minute the last votes were counted here for president, you can bet that the 2028 campaign has begun, and we now have a 39-year-old former senator as vice president, and I guarantee you the race for that is on with J.D. Vance and Governor DeSantis, and who knows.
And I also would like to let you know that in her concession speech, she didn't give up. She seemed to leave the door open for her leadership of the Democratic Party.
It wouldn't surprise me in the least.
So we may see these folks again. We certainly, I think, are done with Kamala Harris. John, one final word before we have to sign off for our listeners and viewers.
We don't know the Pennsylvania General Assembly final results yet. Democrats have a one-seat majority going into it, and right now there's a few seats not called yet. So we're kind of in this limbo area where we don't know if Democrats are going to have a majority there, or if Republicans also have a clean sweep there. So waiting on those results, we will be sure to report on it for you. So certainly a good night for Republicans in the Keystone State, and we'll continue to keep all the everyone aware of who is.
John, we appreciate your being here with all of your encyclopedic knowledge about what's been going on here. It helps us very, very, very much. And Jeffrey, tip of the hat to you, my friend. We will be talking and battling again. Okay.
Just think of all the things we'll be able to talk about for the next 4 years.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. Well, we'll see you again, everyone, next week, because we're still battling it out on Battleground PA. See you guys soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.